Hi there, this is Martin from Cape Wonder Europe, also known as Supermania, and currently heading their campaign for Restore Superman 4. For those of you that don't know me, I am kind of the self-appointed ambassador for this picture. And over the period of the last 20, 30 years, I've been researching and I've become kind of the historian for this film. I've always championed it. You can call it what you like, a guilty pleasure or whatever other term fits the bill. But for me, it represents a time when, at 13 years old, I was thoroughly captivated by the Superman movie series. And this film, although even at the tender age that I was no exception. It was really exciting to see the characters again. Um, and it was wonderful to be immersed in that world created by the Salkinds and Richard Donner back in the day again. So I'm so excited to be talking about this, finally. This is the first audio commentary I've done, and it's appropriate, really, that I talk about Superman 4, seeing as I'm kind of, intrinsically associated with it by now, for better or worse. And, I wanted to kind of, this isn't going to be one of those commentaries where, and I'm sure you've seen many where you've sat and you've watched them, and if you're a fan of film, as I am, and, there are long protracted pauses between the director or whomever is making the commentary, and you get to the point where you're thinking, well, maybe the cat's got the remote and turned it off. This isn't going to be one of those commentaries. This is going to be as informative and as insightful as I could possibly be, sharing everything that I know about this film, because over a period of that many years, you learn quite a bit. Some of it you will probably know, and some of it you may not. But it's going to be light-hearted. It's not going to be. I mean, this isn't 2001, so let's not get ourselves into any kind of illusions that it's anything but it is. And so it needs to be a fun commentary. It can't be anything else. But let's go back. Let's go back in time, and let's relive this, and let's talk about the kind of thing that we'd like to see in a re-release now. Speaking of, the campaign Restore Superman 4, which I'm heading, is an effort to get the original cut, Sidney J. Furie's original cut of the film, released by Warner Brothers. That is it. There is no more to it than that. Preferably a Warner Archive release, but again, it doesn't matter which form it comes in as long as it comes at all. So I would like to hold off any kind of audio commentary until then, but in absence of that, let's just have some fun with what we have already. And so therefore, let's talk about everything from start to finish. I'm just about to start the picture up, and I'm going to click play right now, and the Warner Brothers logo is coming up, and that incredible John Williams motif. And as we start, already there are changes that were fundamental to the original cut of this picture. For a start, immediately after the Warner's logo came up, the opening scene of the Russian satellite was supposed to take place, followed by the credits that you're watching now. And if you have the Superman 4 soundtrack, you'll know that, because there's a break between. It was a very James Bond style prelude, if you like. One that I thought would have worked brilliantly, and I'm so upset that they changed that. The first thing they changed is, it still doesn't sit well with me, because when you think about how dramatic, in a Bondian sense, the opening scenes are, a pre-title sequence is what they call it, isn't it, these days? And so we launch into these credits straight away, which we now know were the work of the storyboard artist Martin Asprey. Much lauded by just about everybody. These glittery floating titles, even he's not happy with. When he was interviewed a while back and spoke about this, I think it was kind of thrown at him to do last minute. And I think it was one of the last things that they did to tie the picture off, to get it finished. But what you're seeing below that apparently is actual footage taken from the space shuttle. This is IMAX footage of the Earth uh, taken in the mid 80s, I believe. And as you see the titles float through, you'll notice they do these clever little crossfades of different places where the orbiter is filming what's below, which is really smart, really sharp, I thought. I mean, there's no kind of I think it was only ever mentioned in some of the publicity. It's not overtly spoken about here, but yeah, that's what it is. And so the combination of this and the S shield that comes up and the relationship it has with the other pictures, they didn't use the what should we call it, the crystal logo from the previous Superman films, because Canon didn't have, I don't think, rights to that. And so we get this, oh gosh, I mean, so many people refer to it as the what's the name of that suite? I think they call it the Jelly Bear logo or something like that. But anyway, here we go. Such fantastic miniature work with this. And even if, the rest of the picture in terms of visual effects doesn't live up to expectations, this opening scene I thought was really captivating. And here we are with this chap here, giving it a sing-song, and look at those glorious interiors, really nice set. But if you keep your eye on the astronaut now, as this piece of space debris comes in. This really could have done with some space dust spinning off it, and it really could have done without the sound effects, incidentally. But if you keep your eye just on the astronaut now, as it comes in, you'll notice that, unfortunately, he gets decapitated straight off, or at least the model does. Now, if you haven't seen that before, if that's new to you, then I'm sorry to kind of leave that with you, but it is an infamous gaffe, the first of many in this picture, that would need attention to rectify, because it's so sad, really, because the rest of this is so well done. This whole scene, the way it plays out. This is the introduction of Superman in a shot that you're going to see many times during this picture. But alternatively, the life-flying scenes, which is what you're looking at right here as Chris takes off, these were of a superb standard. And there we go, there's that same shot again. That's twice in the same scene. I kind of want to talk about the physics of Superman in this film and in general, because I think in this picture it's more pertinent than ever, really, because we talk about how sound can carry, just like he's saying here. And incidentally, when he's speaking Russian here, I do wonder if he's Chris's father, Franklin Reeve. I wonder if that was must have been an interesting phone call when he called up and said, "Dad, I need to speak Russian in this next picture. Can you help me?" And how wonderful if Franklin Reeve at the other end of the line gave him the exact pronunciation of that line. What fun! So. And here we are in Smallville, or as reality would know it, Baldock in Hertfordshire. How they were able to recreate the Kent farm in such precise detail still awes me, I think. The original farm from Superman the movie, was still standing in Calgary, and indeed still is. But this, because the whole picture was shot on location in the UK, they had to, I guess, recreate it, and it's fairly flawless. Other than the barn doors here opening the other way to how they did in Donna's film. Apart from that, I mean, the house and the farmhouse and the barn, fantastic to see again. And the casual viewer would not have been able to tell that was a different location to the one that they actually used, as indeed the crystal starship prop, as you see here. This was originally scripted as Jor-El's voice, so presumably they would have got Marlon Brando, or at least an impressionist, to do the dialogue at this point. I think it's good that they used Susanna York again for this. This is, again, I love the tiebacks to the previous pictures. You know, this is the story thread that they've maintained canon, or the writers at this point. You know, there's some of the small details that they did get right. Um, so you know, to maintain that kind of familiarity, if you like, again with the crystals, again with the, you know, the Kryptonian motifs that we all came to love. It was really nice to see this again. And again, Christopher Reeve looking, you know, magnificent. Not really uh, any different to how he looked in the previous pictures. Although, yes, he was noticeably thinner, I suppose, due to, and this came from him back in the day, that all the live flying that they'd done over the three pictures had left him with like a herniated disc, and so he didn't do the workout regime that he'd done for the previous three pictures. But you know, details. It doesn't affect the picture. I think when they missed a trick, then when Clark kind of evaporates the starship there. I think they probably should have used heat vision to kind of burn it away, rather than, you know, just him straining and it disappeared. But again, I'm going to talk about the physics of Superman as we go through this from the comic book in relation to this picture, and how they reflect one another and take advantage of one another, and just actually have no no relationship whatsoever to each other. It's a fascinating topic, and we'll touch on it as, you know, the powers get more ridiculous as the film goes on. And here we have an actor called Don Fellows, who you may know from a little picture called Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's got a good tie to Raiders, this film, because here's Don Fellows. He played one of the agents in Raiders, and you're going to see Bill Hootkins later, who played the other one. So both those actors, great, you know, character actors, were used over and over again. But in Don Fellows' case especially, you'll know him as the general in Superman 2, the guy that says, "I answer only to the president." That's him. And so he kind of, you know, he's a mainstay of the Superman series. But the fact is that, you know, that you don't recognize him from that in this picture. I think really speaks highly to to his performances. He's just terrific. And this was, I think, a lovely, lovely scene. Again, recalling with the musical motifs, recalling with the set, recalling with because Christopher Reeve never appeared in the Smallville scenes in the Donna picture. But you know, it's really nice to think that this is a specific continuation of that. Yes, the scene with him knelt by his parents' graveside is missing. He's omitted. That's one of the deleted scenes that everybody wants to see, myself included. That, I think, takes place just before that shot where he turns to walk up the path of the farm. Um, Only a few seconds, I believe. I think it's just kind of the introduction to the scene itself. Um, it doesn't affect the, you know, the storyline. It doesn't affect anything. But it would have been wonderful to see, because of, as I mentioned, recalling back to you know, those wonderful Donna scenes, and you know, how wonderful, you know, that we got another chance to see the Kent farm. And it does form kind of a subplot in this picture. It's kind of like the basis for a, you know, living a simpler life in you know, in the contemporary 80s, as it was, where, you know, life was at probably at its zenith, really, in terms of the peak of our civilization, if you like, if you want to quote the Matrix. Um, so you know, it's kind of a throwback to something more simple, you know, the Americana of what is represented in Donna's film. Um, and so here we have Lenny Luthor, a new character written um, in absence of Otis, I guess. It was an interesting concept, I suppose, to have Lex Luthor's nephew show up in this. And of course, John Cryer, absolutely the peak of his popularity at this point. recognizable to moviegoers all over as, being made famous by Pretty in Pink and such like. And this whole scene where he breaks Lex out of the chain gang is, I struggle with this because it is the wrong side of camp for me, especially when this car goes flying over this, and you can see the pitch of it, the angle that it goes. It's going to land directly on its roof, like that. And had you have left it at that, had they have left it at that, and the fate of the two guards was kind of obvious. This shot just kind of like, this is kind of Carry On Superman, which I could really do without it. I think it cheapens the whole thing if it had just left it the way it was. But again, these are kind of, you get to the point where you've seen something so many times that you kind of edit it in your own head, or there's an ideal edit in your own head. Now, see this driver in this cab here. Don't worry if you didn't see him. Don't worry if you didn't get a good shot of him, because there he is standing right next to Marco Kid. Oh dear. I guess they thought they could get away with that, but again, that illustrates perfectly when you've seen this film too many times that you notice all this stuff, like the fact that the extras are used again and again, sometimes within the same scene. And here we are in the London Underground station. This is Aldwych station, and it is pretty evident that we are not in New York. But yes, it's not New York, and it's obviously not New York, but Metropolis is a fictional city, folks, and it can be what it wants to be, I guess, is what the filmmakers were thinking. Aldwych itself gets plenty of use. It's I think it was used in Tomorrow Never Dies. And so, it serves its purpose quite well here. But yeah, as a scene, here's that shot coming up again. Although that one's a terrific one, that one where he goes past. But we're here again with that same one. According to Margot Kidder, the driver was originally an Afro-Caribbean actor, but he couldn't perform. And so they replaced him with an Asian guy who you only see the back of. He's the driver. And apparently, Christopher Reeve's son Matthew is somewhere in this crowd, although I've not been able to really home him down. There's that guy with the receding hairline in the front there. That's the same extra. Again, I love this little interlude from Chris, just to kind of remind you that yep, there's our guy, and he has changed very little in the decade that we've been watching these films. He's as straightforward, sincere, and as trustworthy as ever. And Chris's performance, just again, there are nuances in this with his performance that are all, I believe, down to him. I mean, having Clark Kent show up at the Smallville farm without the glasses. If you watch every other iteration, I think, besides Man of Steel, Clark is always wearing the glasses in Smallville. It makes no sense. He doesn't need to do that. And so Chris created this kind of, his Superman persona, his Clark Kent persona, and then something in between that was just a guy, just a fella that, wore casual clothes and didn't wear glasses. And, he had an existence to himself. And I thought that was a fascinating concept, and they probably should have used it a little bit more. You see him again in his apartment, and he's the same. And he looks like he's going through the same kinds of dilemmas that, the rest of us do, uncertainty, not sure of himself, all that kind of stuff. But that's to come. But again, as we're on the fourth picture right now, I think we needed another dimension to the character. And I was so glad that Chris was able to, to throw some of that in. In the meantime, it's great to see the old gang again. Jackie Cooper, as grisly as ever. Beautiful Mariel Hemingway. What a great addition to the cast she was. And this set that you're looking at is not in fact a set at all. It is in the Avebury building in Milton Keynes. I think this is like the 4th or 5th floor. If you can see out the window behind Perry there are no high rises, no skyscrapers or anything like that. This is just one of the corporate build. I think it's Argos headquarters now, or at least it used to be. Or no, is it Sainsbury's? Anyway, but this boardroom exists just as it seems right here, with the exception of what's behind the characters right now. That partition is gone. But yeah, to see that, I suppose you could call it a set if you like, is is quite beguiling because little has changed. And as they walk into the bullpen here, this is now the canteen for that building, and so there's tables and chairs everywhere for the canteen. But back in the day, I mean, I think John Rosemark did a great job with. They could never replicate, I don't think, the Daily Planet set. I mean, that was a set at Pinewood, incidentally. All those, acrylic partitions with, and the close quarters that the Daily Planet was in the Donner films. I think this is as good as you could possibly get in a modern office setting. I mean, it's reasonable to assume that, the Daily Planet would have evolved just like everything else. And, this is set in 1986, and so, therefore, you'd expect things to move on, and indeed they do. It's just great to have the gang back. Margot Kidder, Jimmy Olsen, look at him, Mark McClure. I mean, I think he's in his 30s at this point, and he's still exuding that kind of energy that he had in the Donner pictures. This is an interesting thing with the whole the Warfield subplot about the whole Rupert Murdoch-ness of it all, and hostile takeovers and all this stuff that was indicative of the 80s. They managed to squeeze into this picture. And that's Jane Topman. Hello, Jane. Jane's debut, her theatrical debut. And I think that she could only speak of this film very recently in an interview, because it was a screen debut and she was actually dubbed by another actress, and it upset her so that she couldn't bring herself to talk about it again. So I think with enough water under the bridge, she's able to kind of reconcile with it now. But yeah, she was dubbed, and she kind of deleted it from her from a resume, I think. But nonetheless, this was a screen debut. This is Damien McLawhorn, fabulous guy, and that setting was at a school called the Sir Frank Markham School. Again, no, just set dressing there, no change to the building. Again, we stay in Milton Keynes, and this is the same building that the Daily Planet is housed in. This is the very same building, and in the on the first floor is this area called the Winter Gardens, which is just kind of an atrium where you have all this fabulous area of greenery. It's wonderful. And alongside that is a walkway where Gene Hackman and Cryer are right now, which provided them sufficient space to build, to throw in all these museum-style props. On the right side, on stage right here, there are a bunch of nightclubs and shops, cleverly kept out of shot. But yeah, so again, using the best of the space. If it came to a restoration of this picture, I would, and the physics of Superman, I would love to do this over again, because the fact that he cut Superman's hair with a pair of bolt cutters, just to this day, how many are we, 35 years later, still makes me lose sleep. God, it's unbearable. I mean, there are so many comic covers from the 50s and whatnot, and you can envision them now if you're a fan, and Superman sat there in a barber's chair, and the barber's got a pair of shears and they're breaking on his hair, and it's like, oh, gosh, Superman, your hair is so strong. And we've had, there were decades of that. And then in the picture, he comes along and he cuts them with a pair of... I wanted to see... Luther is a scientist. I wanted to see a really primitive, pair of ever-ready batteries, gaffer taped to the handle, and maybe a kryptonite chunk on the tip. We know we still got some of that left from Superman the movie. And if he just... As he squeezed the pincers together, if there was a little green explosion maybe, and then the hair dropped, then the weight dropped, I could swallow that. But as it is, I can't. I just can't. So the interplay here between Clark and Lacey is wonderful, because Chris, again, one of the most underrated comedic actors, I think, of his time. He never got I don't think, a real opportunity to show off his comedic skills, like here. Um, he does this so well because you look at him and you look at the his kind of stance and listen to his voice and everything, and you think, no way is this guy could this guy be Superman? Um, and but by then, 4 pictures in, he completely had us anyway. So there was never any kind of, we just took this as read. Of course, people don't know Superman. Of course, that he can exist as this alter ego and have himself a life. But this is kind of the fulcrum now that the whole picture swings on. This is the letter from Jeremy. And if you listen to what Chris was saying back in the day about what he wanted from this picture, it was all to do with, he wanted to kind of touch on the topic in a very naive and entertaining way. He didn't want it to be preachy. He didn't want it to be, Tom Mankiewicz, when he called him early on, says, look, you can't solve the world's problems. You can't deal with world hunger. You can't deal with disease. You can't deal with anything like that. But I think Chris kind of thought his way around that, and he took something that was very prevalent in the 80s. And this very much was the whole nuclear arms race. This was something that made the news every single day. I remember because I was there. And if you were there too, then you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And it was an actual fear. And I think that Chris kind of maybe felt like he could maybe dissipate some of that by making something like this. And, asking the question, what if there was somebody out there? What if somebody could actually go ahead and do something like this? I mean, the politics of it are ridiculous. You could never, ever, ever, ever see your way to the bottom of it. But all he's doing, I think, is asking very naively the question of what if, which I think is an ideal kind of subject matter for a Superman film. And there were many naysayers against that. Again, Tom Mankiewicz advised him not to do it. I don't think that Wes Craven, the original director for this film, did you know that? Who fell out at an early stage, I don't think he could resolve that either. Dick Donner was asked to come back on board along with Tom, and I think that they thought that by then, this was well before the Donner cut and everything else, even though it probably could have led to that being restored at a much earlier date. I don't think that they thought that they could pick up where they left off, and by then it's pretty much its own thing. And so it was pretty much left to Chris, and this is the direction that he wanted to take it. It's admirable on many levels. I think it doesn't work on others. For example, here, again, he doesn't transform into Clark Kent here. He transforms into his other self. When he takes those glasses off, again, that's that third persona coming out, and he does it so delicately throughout the picture. And you think that you're watching a genuine guy that kind of has two identities to juggle, which is really fascinating and could have been explored more. This is a set. This is a miniature. In front of it, the crystal spires in the fortress with the full size set behind it, built at Elstree. They chose to light it green, which was an odd choice. I would rather, it retain the kind of appearance that it did in the earlier films. I mean, it's built beautifully. There's no reason why it couldn't have been. But for whatever reason, because probably this is a darker subject matter, they wanted to make it a bit more atmospheric. These guys could have done with some reverb on their voices as well, again to recall the Kryptonian. The Kryptonian Council members from the original picture, betrayed. That would have worked. But again, here we are. This is what we're talking about. Superman's third persona, where he's just a guy that's just come home from work in his apartment watching TV, concerned just as much as anybody else would be by what's going on in the world around him. But the pressure that I think that he's trying to establish the character is under by looking at what's going on and thinking, well, what can I do to intervene? Should I intervene? It's not just a moral question; it's a political one. you kind of feel that he's mired in a decision about what to do because only he can. Um, so it's great to have some, comic relief, and the interplay between these guys is wonderful. And Lord, do I miss Margot Kidder? She was so wonderful. I mean, what you see with her when she's playing Lois Lane, especially in the first couple of pictures, and we're 10 years down the line here, so it's a different kind of. But again, that thread of when you watch this couple together, you kind of recall everything they've been through before. And she was so lovely. She was no different. I can absolutely assure you that what you see on the screen with Margot's kind of a kind of quirkiness and upbeatness and that voice that she has uh, is absolutely what she was. That it was she was a joy to behold. Um, and this should have been such a wonderful, wonderful sequence that recalls again. I mean, it's amazing actually as I'm watching this how many scenes that it directly emulates from the previous pictures. This, of course, being the "Can you read my mind" sequence again, um, and the visual effects let it down so badly. In the absence of any front projection equipment, this is all blue screened, um, which is pretty evident, isn't it? I don't have to tell anybody that has any knowledge about visual effects what this is. I mean, you can see from the location shots that they actually took all the background plates. The background plates are astonishing. The way that they passes through the Golden Gate Bridge there, wonderful. Port of San Francisco. All of these are brilliant. And then you basically cut and paste, your foreground action on top of it, and it just. This was interesting. This is a much shorter sequence. If you watch the deleted scenes, you actually realise that the fun of this is that, and we're going to talk about the physics of Superman again. He actually kind of launches Lois. He kind of throws her forward, so she's kind of floating by herself. Now, in terms of the physics of Superman and the way that he's portrayed on film, and comic purists can confirm this for me, but Superman has what they call an aura. And I think in physics as we know it, if you look at the original "Can you read my mind" sequence, if Superman is flying with Lois at arm's length and she's at arm's length with him, she would be dragging behind him like a wet dishcloth, right? If physics are to be believed. The physics of Superman, however, is I think that, especially as represented in the films, is that he can extend his aura to enclose whoever is with him. So that's how he's able to basically manipulate Lois Lane into flying next to him, because she's contained within his aura. The fact that Superman can breathe in space is nothing to do with anything other than the fact that his aura extends around him, and that's why you can still see air flapping around his cape, for example. So space doesn't actually touch him, he's in his own bubble, if that makes sense. Or at least this is the way that I've been able to rationalize it, and my rationale, I think, is backed up very well by the comics. Having said that, the memory forgetting kiss, I don't think has any I don't think has any grounding in comic canon whatsoever, but that's fun, and it's a throwback to Superman 2 again. So I know we're on familiar territory. But yeah, getting back to the physics of it, the way that he can pick things up with one hand, and a large objects, and the large object doesn't just drop from the other end with the weight, I think is because he can extend his aura to maintain that and that kind of thing. We're going to touch on it again in a minute, but in the meantime, let's go straight back into this, because it's a wonderful sequence. It reestablishes them as, they've been lovers, and I think Chris was kind of keen to kind of like, we need to move on from that. People have seen them be lovers, but they need to be something else. Their relationship needs to evolve at this point. Margot was disappointed, I think, that couldn't have continued. I think that, because she does love him, that she wanted to maintain that. And I don't think that she was happy being kind of reduced in tears to being friends. But I think that, there was never any way that it could progress. Here we are back in Milton Keynes again, outside Milton Keynes Central Station. David John Waterman as the hot dog seller in the background. God bless him, wonderful guy. He's excited. He's just as excited in real life as he was back there. Wonderful stuff. We're crossing the uh, open area in front of Milton Keynes train station, and as we cut, we go into what used to be Wembley Conference Centre. No longer exists. But how clever a cut was that? Because that was two locations miles away from each other. And again, this is the lobby of the conference centre as well. It's a very short sequence, and you know, it does what it's supposed to do. It doesn't kind of have the atmosphere or the kind of epicness, for want of a better word, that Chris wanted from this picture. He wanted it to be smack in the middle of New York, and he wanted to walk right down 52nd Street with people throwing, ribbons out of buildings and that kind of stuff, which would have been glorious, wouldn't it? But in absence of that, it doesn't, it just feels a bit enclosed. And I think that's what bothered him most. This doesn't, however. This feels every bit as epic as you'd hope anything from a Superman picture would be. I think this is probably, arguably, the best scene in the film, for me anyway. And I remember as a 13-year-old sat there watching this, because obviously nobody knew what he was going to say. Nobody knew what the extent of this speech was. But when he gets up there and he's saying these things, and again, it's an idealistic, naive approach to life. It's not just politics. It's about, this is how I see your world. You would probably really benefit from seeing it the way that I do too. But right now, you've got yourselves caught up in something that's spiraling completely out of control, and the way that you're going, because you people have a history of not being able to control yourselves, you're not going to be able to prevent this from happening. And so you have left me no choice but to intervene in this. I don't want to. I'm not supposed to interfere. My very basis for being here is that I leave you people to get on with it. But you can't do this. You've taken it too far. And so, what an inspirational... I mean, when he said, all nuclear weapons, the audience in the cinema, oh, yeah, everybody on their feet, just like this. In terms of restoring this particular scene, I think cutaways to places all over the world, inside inside a Chinese household, inside outside on Times Square, in London, in Russia, everywhere. The world's reaction, because this is supposed to be a picture about the entire world. And again, Chris is at it again, trying to tie it to everywhere by speaking in people's native languages, going to all these locales, going all over the world, and dropping in and speaking the language fluently and that kind of stuff. This is all Chris's kind of attempt to make Superman not less American. That's not the intention at all, I don't think, but I think to make him like a global phenomenon rather than a US phenomenon, which I think, again, 4 pictures deep, look at that for a miniature, superb, was a great thing to do, or an imaginative thing to do, but more importantly, something that nobody else had done to this point. And it's a film series, this isn't TV where you've got an hour every week to explore this stuff. You've got to get it in quick, and you've got to get it in effectively. And so I think that, he just looked upon it, and I think he agreed to do the picture because he saw an opportunity to get this kind of stuff across. He's for everybody. He's everybody's friend, and he is dependent. We can depend on him, and we can depend on him if we're in, the other side of the world, or if, we're at the end of our driveway. That's, I think, what he was trying to get across. And this, again, comic purists, folks, this actually exists in comic panels. This ridiculous great big net with all the missiles in being tossed into the sun is actually taken directly from 60s, 70s comics. Does it work on film? Frankly, no. And that shot there with the explosion of the sun, that should have been a whiteout, because, again, luckily enough, we get to see it again with the birth of Nuclear Man. And the repetition of shots undoes the quality of this picture, in my opinion. So that should have been a whiteout. But as I was saying, there was such opportunity with this, and you can sense the kind of ambition with it. And some of it is realised. I mean, look at this fantastic set that Gene Hackman is in Austria. I mean, it's every bit as, it's not as imaginative as the underground lair from Dick Donner's picture, but it's as extravagant as we know the character of Lex Luthor to be. Um, and again, a couple of girls with him. He doesn't change, does he? His habits are. There's no Miss Tessmacher. We really we miss Valerie Perrine. I mean, yeah, she was so good, but it would have been great to catch up with them as a couple, wouldn't it? If they later on, and she was, maybe they were married or what have you, and she just gives him a hard time with everything. That would have been funny, especially with Lenny involved as well. What a trio that would have been. But here's Bill Hootkins. Again, the Raiders connection. Bill Hootkins was in Batman, Star Wars, and right behind him, Jim Broadbent, now a British national treasure, and this was his screen debut as well. This is where he started. A very prestigious actor these days, as I say, pretty much a national treasure, and this is where he began. He's barely recognisable here, actually, but nonetheless. Um, and so here we go with the, I guess the main thrust of the plot, because uh, this is Lex's plan. Obviously, now that Superman has announced that he's intervening in the arms race, Lex, being the opportunist cad that he is, senses opportunity, and so goes headlong into this kind of campaign to create one of his own. And now this was the interesting parallel of this is that at the same time this was being made, John Byrne at DC was writing, or had in fact published, his miniseries Man of Steel. And in Man of Steel, there is Lex Luthor becomes obsessed with creating a Superman of his own, just one that works for him, which makes much more sense. And in that comic book version, he's kind of like what Nuclear Man 1 in the cut scenes of this picture became. It was a kind of like a zombie version of him that started out perfectly and then kind of degraded over time. And so it was basically the modern version of Bizarro. I think it was cleverly mentioned in some of the scripting as well, that I think Lex Luthor called him some bizarre beast or something like that. But as he degenerates, he becomes into this fascinating creature that pretty much resembles completely the evil Superman from Superman 3. And so it's a weird kind of crossover upon a crossover, but I think that Byrne did it better, because the fight that Superman has with himself at the end, whereas Nuclear Man in this apparently retains some of Superman's memory, the Bizarro in John Byrne's series actually thinks that he is Superman, and so retains his memories, and so he actually has a fight with himself, but he dresses himself as Clark Kent first, which I think was fascinating. So you've got Bizarro, and he's put Clark Kent's clothes on, and he looks like a zombie in Clark Kent's clothes. I recommend it. I recommend Man of Steel anyway. It's the best origin retelling, other than what Gary Frank did later on with Jeff Johns later, but for its time it was wonderful. And if this film could have adapted some of that a bit more, I think it would have worked even better than it does. But again, here we are. This is the backlot of Elstree Studios. This is just outside one of the studio buildings, actually. This space now, and yeah, the parallels between what was going on in the comics and this at the time, probably from from the release of the first picture all the way through to the end here, I think that the comics and the films fed off each other really quite well. It was so gratifying, especially for Chris, that they started to draw Superman much more to resemble Chris, but then he resembled the Kurt Swan version of it anyway, so you couldn't really go wrong, could you? But yeah, it was a great time to be a Superman fan. It was a great time to be alive, the whole of the 80s. But again, with the nuclear theme, quite A wonderful shot. Wonderful shot. That was a new one, the up and over the camera that they devised for this film. Um, and I'm, you know, as far as repetition is concerned, I'm glad that they used that because it's a terrific looking shot. But again, if you look at this next shot where the missile hits the sun, it's the same pyrotechnic. There you go, as the one that was used when all the missiles went in. Uh, Using it there is fine, but you know, if you used it as you know, the original was a whiteout, that would have been so much better. Ironically, followed by probably the best animated visual effect in the film, which is the Nuclear Man embryo expanding to full size. Again, I can't get to grips with the fact that he's fully dressed. In the comic adaptation, he wasn't. You know, at this point, he was naked. You could have done that. You know, there was absolutely no. I mean, there was nudity in the Superman films. I mean, again, naivety. I mean, you know, little Aaron Slominski came out of the craft and he was naked. Nobody cares about that kind of stuff. So if Mark Pillow had emerged and it was shot that he was tastefully nude, you know, there could have been a way to have done it where he was, you know, crouched in such a fashion that it didn't show anything. And then as it flies off, you know, the effects cover the, you know, your bits. You know, there's no reason not to do that. And then, you know, Lex says, I've put this thing together just, you know, just so you can rival the Man of Steel. And then it's kind of a poor rehash of it, because that would explain that costume a bit better. I mean, it's beautifully refined as it is, but it looks like a bad guy's idea of what a bad guy's costume should be, which is great in context. It makes sense. But, you know, not when it comes out of a little white box on the side of a missile. I don't buy it. It's too much of a reach. And, you know, it's what my mum used to call a bucket of shit from China, you know, too far-fetched. And the far-fetched moments, I think, really kind of bruise the context of this film. Because if you take them out and watch it for what it is, it's a great little picture. Again, it's not 2001. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't want to be. But, you know, with stuff like this, you know, with Reeve playing it up and great support, you know, again, many folks or many fans of this, you know, it's not a picture for cynics, as I keep trying to say. But if you watch it for what it is, and the kind of lightheartedness of it all, and the, you know, the sleight of hand, as John Williams used to, you know, describe how these things were done, it's all there. It's all present. You know, like in this scene when, you know, Chris is doing his, you know, my back hurts and I'm anything but Superman. You know, I'm anything but. And then, you know, you see how pained he is on his face, and it's all performance. Yeah, but a performance with a performance, if that makes sense, because, you know, obviously none of this touches him. He doesn't, you know, does he even breathe air? You don't know. So it's like the fact that he goes through the motions to, you know, try so hard to appear and function as a human being, when, you know, he clearly isn't one. You know, nobody that looks like that is human being. He was something, wasn't he, Christopher? He was, you know, next level handsome. But again, so he, in the same scene, he defaults from regular citizen to, oh, here I am, Superman, there you go. Fantastic. And what a great payoff line. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Again, background plates, blue screen, not too bad a shot. And so, again, yeah, all these throwbacks and all of this, how it was tied together, really kind of put you in such safe territory. You know, you're watching a Superman film, you know what to expect. It's like a Bond, it's like a Roger Moore Bond specifically. And the thrill of watching one of these things, you know, it's all brand new and it's a brand new adventure, and it's the same characters and they've advanced and they've, you know, they're in different settings, and it's in, you know, how much more wonderful could they? That's what captivated me. That's what captivated me from, you know, 78 onwards. In execution, yes, just like everybody says, they kind of steadily decline picture by picture like sequels do. Ironically, I think they would have rectified that if they'd have done a fifth one. I think the stars would have realigned and we would have got the payoff that we all deserved. But, you know, as a chapter in a series goes, this is probably more like a comic book, page after page, start to finish, than any of the other pictures manage. If you think about it, Richard Donner's film is an epic retelling of a myth. Superman 2 is a comedic action film. Superman 3 is an outright Richard Pryor comedy. And Superman 4 is a Roger Corman comic book. So there's something in there for everybody. A general audience, I'm told, prefers Superman 3 because, of that comedic aspect of it. I think it's incredibly entertaining in a stir crazy Richard Pryor back catalogue comedy kind of a way. It's my least favorite because of that, but I'm a science fiction fan ostensibly. I'm not even a superhero fan per se. I find the science fiction aspect of the Superman character, fascinating, and so that's what captivated me. Um, and so the I like this film because it is a much more Superman-y film, if you like, than three managed to be. Aside from the fight, the junkyard fight in Superman 3, I think it kind of, and the sweet scenes in Smallville, I think it struggled to find any kind of balance between good source material and what they were trying to do here. And so here is the wonderful Mark Pillow again in real life, such a wonderful, wonderful guy. Um, and he was shown off to his absolute fullest here, wasn't he? An absolute titan of a guy. But again, you have to kind of say to yourself, well, if he's supposed to be a Superman clone early on, uh, there was talk that Chris would play both roles. I think Chris's concern was, well, that's a bit like Superman 3. We've done that already. Let's do something else. I think if you look at the storyboards, I think he was considered uh, as maybe kind of like a live action with animation over the top of him at one point because he appears kind of formless. And then they kind of just settled on this kind of Adonis sun god type thing, which makes sense in the context of him being nuclear and whatnot. But again, a great adversary because, or at least a parallel adversary because he has Superman's powers and a bit more. Um, this is one of the best scenes in the picture as well. This was bold and experimental. This again a throwback to 1940s comedies of which Christopher Reeve was such a fan of. If you weren't aware already, he based his Clark Kent very much on Cary Grant, and so the opportunity he represented here to do the switcheroo between characters, I think would have been. I think he probably would have read this and gone, "Wow, this is going to be. If we can crack this, if we can get this right, this will be really, really good." And they almost do it. Um, the switcheroos are fine. Um, it's just lacking that little something that makes it from just fun into something majestic. But they all play the parts perfectly. I mean, I think the best instance of it is coming up when uh, Lois is trying to coach Clark about the dress. Tell her she looks nice in the dress, and he says, "Oh hey, neat dress," and he's just so unbelievably hopeless. And then the first thing when Superman shows up, just casually dropping out of the sky, is that he approaches Lacey. And Chris, so clever, he's never seen this person before, and so he just looks her up and down as if to say, "Hello, yeah, here it comes. I've never seen you before." And the first thing he says to her is, "What a very attractive outfit you're wearing." And Lois can't wait to steal him away. Oh, wonderful. So from that point of view, it's terrific. Um, but yeah, what a scene! What a scene! And you can see that Chris is getting a bit, or Superman is getting a bit worried about how he's going to see this through. And so it's cleverly written in the sense that one thing has to lead onto another. And has to be quite seamless. Otherwise, both of them are going to be clued in. The only thing is that the payoff isn't what it should be. You know, Superman disappears amicably enough, but it's not. There's no resolution as to where Clark ends up. So from that point of view, it's kind of like, well, where did he go? And that is not a question that is not answered, um, which is troublesome. Here we go with another throwback. This is the balcony scene by any other name. Um, where Lois is doing her, Margot, let's say, is doing her best Harold Pinter kind of staggered delivery, and you know, can't talk for how she's feeling. Really, really good acting. Um, and off we go again. This is the Apiary building, which houses the Daily Planet and the Winter Gardens and the Metropolis Museum. This is the entrance to that same building. How does he do that? How does he not fall over at that point? I mean, what take was this? I mean, he actually, if you watch it over, he actually very, very nearly falls on his backside when he's doing that. He's so close to doing it. And yet, there's no cut. So, there's still no cut. There's still no cut. He runs in, there's the cut. He still runs in, staggers, and manages to perform that whole scene and get his, you know, and remember his lines. Genius. That whole area, incidentally, has got, they must have learned something from this. Health and safety must have watched this and went, oh dear, because it's carpeted right up until that point where he slips over now. Another switcheroo here. Chris enters the limo. Stuntman Mark Stewart exits and wallop straight off. Very good. Kind of undone by the poor visual effect there. Gets its momentum back with a live action shot there. You see how it's kind of, you know, it's so hit and miss. You know, everything about it is kind of like, oh, that's wonderful. Oh dear, that's terrible. Oh, well, that's wonderful. That's terrible. And I think as a consequence of it, because it's so completely inconsistent, I think the in layman's terms, it's just so easy to just dismiss it as rubbish, and it's not. It's not rubbish. You know, there's good work here. There's this wonderful, touching little scene between them, which, you know, she's still trying to say. She's still trying to tell him with her eyes after all this time, even though we've been around. You know, we've done everything there is to do. That she still feels the same way about him as she did when he caught her falling from that helicopter. You know, it was for life for Lois. You really get that impression, even if, you know, Superman has moved on, but because he's come to the conclusion in his life that, you know, he can't belong to that one individual. So he's a bit different, but for her, nothing's changed in a decade. Old switcheroo again, very good. So Lois is. Where is he? So it's a great scene. Probably goes on a little bit too long. But again, and this isn't the best either when he knocks the. But again, it's Clark. It's Clark at his best, isn't it? But again, they're in resolution terms, because when we have the Lex Luthor interlude that's coming up, where he takes over Times Square, Clark's whereabouts after that is unknown. But again, what does this remind you of? This is the same as the Frequency in Superman the movie, except we have video this time. And so, just like then, he transforms and tears away to confront him at his lair, which, to all intents and purposes, is the Empire State Building this time. Man, there we go. I haven't really, because I've, in absence of the deleted scenes, I haven't spoken much about, you know, where they slot in around the context of what, you know, hopefully, if they are released, I would be more than happy to do it again, because there's so much to talk about with the picture as it is. I haven't really touched upon those, but rest assured, if we ever do this again, there's Mark Stewart coming in for a landing. Old-fashioned switcheroo, and here comes Chris straight out after that set. Isn't that clever? Isn't that just one of the oldest and most effective tricks in the book? Watch Never Say Never Again. Towards the end, there's a great switcheroo with Connery behind a rock that he emerges from. That's really good. But again, here we go again with the Superman with Lex Luthor, your disease maniac, and, you know, all the same kind of vocal motifs that we're used to. What are you up to? What are you doing back in Metropolis? Telling him his plan for some reason. You know, telling me exactly what he's up to, because, you know, Gene Hackman as Lex. I mean, there are a lot of people that, you know, that don't think he's a proper representation of Lex from the comics, and he probably isn't. He's his own thing, but he's quite gleefully, or at least Hackman's Luthor is quite gleefully. I don't think he's psychotic. I think he's just an opportunist lunatic, because he's got these. He's very intelligent. He's got all these spectacular ideas, and he's just the most self-serving, uh, toe rag, if you if you like. And he's such grand ambition. He's not like a Bond villain, really. Uh, but what I like about him, I mean, he's got something in common with Bond villains. He's trying to take over the world, but it's from a selfish point of view. He's just he just wants money out of it, or he wants gratification out of it. But he just wants people to say he's the greatest criminal mind of our time. That's all he really wants. You get the feeling that um, you know, he's so playful, but then he can flip, like he does in Superman the movie, where he, Superman asking the question, is this how you get your kicks, by planning the deaths of innocent people? And then he just goes really dark and says no, by causing them, and you believe him, and you get the feeling that he absolutely does not care for the rest of humanity. It's all about him. Um, and he does that really well, and he's just the same in this film. So any callbacks to Gene's appearance in or Lex Luthor's appearance in Superman films, is that if you watch them, it's always, how can he get out of this? What can he get out of this most? Is it a pile of money, or is it Australia? There's always something, and in this instance, he's got into sales, as it turns out. And he knows that his new entrepreneurial uh, scheme to sell nuclear missiles is hampered by the fact that Superman wants to get rid of them all, and it's very simple. In order to succeed, he just has to get rid of Superman, which he's been trying to do for the entirety of the series anyway. So why should this be any different? And here we go. So from this point, this is the battle. This takes up the last third of the film, really. And, it is where the film falls apart, pretty much, starting with the action sequences, the visual effects that, especially this one, oh, God, I can't watch that. And again, there's your shot from the beginning. The miniatures are fine. Don't have struggle with the miniatures. At this point, right after this scene, this is where the Red Square, I think, happens. Yep, and then it's done to the Great Wall of China. Some wonderful live flying sequences here. But, it's meant to be. And you can see that the intention is to make this an absolute mega battle across the globe. They didn't do that in Superman 2. It was held in Metropolis, and it was 3 against 1. And in that context, it worked beautifully. To this day, I still think that, the Metropolis battle in 2 holds up really well. But, the ambition was to do it all over the world and show all these fabulous landmarks like the Great Wall of China. And, but you can't do that on the budget that they had. So, going back to the physics of Superman, what power was that we just witnessed, ladies and gentlemen? Any idea? Well, it was mooted as mortar vision, is what they called it. So all of a sudden, he's got Superman has a telekinetic ability to mold things back together. Doesn't work. It's cheap, and it's a get out. And if you'd have done what they did in the comic, which was to have him rebuild it at super speed, no less easier to swallow in that context, but done correctly with visual effects, because he does it in the comics. It's what Superman does, and therefore it's permissible. But as it was, it's just like, oh God, that's, they didn't have the money to finish that, and there's nothing more evident, is there? And then you go to miniature work right here, where, that's of a very good standard. Incidentally, the matte painting of the volcano, as you look down on it in this scene, was done by Martin Asbury, and it still exists. He uses it as a ramp for his dog to get into the house. Would you believe? There's a fascinating fact if ever you've heard one. True story. Lovely miniature of the Italian town. This portion was a set built at Elstree Studios. Here's that same shot again. And this is the rest of it. This is This is really good, I think. I enjoyed this part. The heat vision that we've come to know and love, as established in all the other films, straight out of the comic books, cuts off the top of Mount Etna. Oh, that's the matte painting behind Superman as we speak. And, nice miniature work here um, as it goes and it plugs in the volcano. There could have been more, pickups there just to show a bit more detail. Um, and in the making of special that I managed to put on YouTube recently, which shows the making of this scene. This was improvised on set, where he turns around and he speaks to the Italian priest here. It was important to Chris that he spoke their language. And you look at him. I didn't see him. I've never seen that before, where the priest puts his hands together to pray as he flies off. That's a great touch. Um, Again, visual effects with the nails. Blue screen here. And the opticals on top of the nails, and standing on a platform, rotating platform there to suggest that they're in space. You know, it kind of it dictates to you that it was done cheaply, and this is the paramount objection with everybody has to it. I mean, again, look at the background plate there, absolutely beautiful. Look at the foreground, it's dilute, it's not color matched, it's weak. And for every good shot you get a poor one to follow, and so you cut. Wonderful live action, great set behind him, not too bad a full size shot there, and you get a close up of flying there, a blue screen shot that just doesn't meet standards. Again, looking over his shoulder, the costumes dilute, miniature again, not so good, and I don't even like to sit here and pick apart shot by shot, because it serves no purpose. I mean, surely the whole impetus of everything is to just concentrate on telling the story, but the problem with this picture overall is that you get so taken out of the story, of the context of the story and what's going on, because you're too busy looking at how cheap and nasty the effects are, because it fails you as an audience. It fails you. I mean, that's a great shot, I think, when the Liberty is going down. Again, not so good. That one where it's, and where's, why aren't the crowd going absolutely crazy, and why isn't this a much wider vista where people are running and screaming, in terror? I mean, what Reeve managed to do physically here, where he catches the thing and then brings it up. Again, physics of Superman, because he can extend his aura, he can grab that statue from the point that he's grabbing it from and not have him drop like a stone underneath him straight. Does that make sense? This is what I'm trying to say. I think when he touches something and when he applies his powers to it, when he applies his strength to it, he can maintain any kind of manipulation of the Earth's physics that he wants to. So it's a bit like holding Lois at arm's length. It's a bit like when he picks other stuff up and it stays rigid. I mean, we all know in reality it's being held up by wires at the other end. But what I'm trying to suggest is that, in the context of the films, this is what his abilities are, or at least this is how he's able to, do the things that he does. I mean, especially, a lot of this is hinted at as well. I mean, in Superman the movie, Jor-El says, "You will defy their gravity." He doesn't, say, "You will be able to fly." And I don't think that he actually flies either. I think that in a very short and, naive explanation of Superman's flight is that he defies gravity and then gathers momentum. And I think he can project himself at limitless speed. I don't think that necessarily equates to flying in the sense that, you have to, or the physics of flying. And I think that he levitates, and I think that he gathers momentum. That's what's suggested by these films, anyhow, or the physics of Superman in these pictures. Because, the reality is he's picked up by the waist by flyers and by wires, sorry, and, and steadily hoisted into the air, and then it cuts to another process to make him appear like flying. But a reasonable explanation of that in terms of physics is that he levitates and then gathers momentum to fly. And nowhere in the series is it forcibly kind of imposed on you than this film, because you kind of have to justify a lot of things here. This is where the plot kind of tries to accelerate a bit more in terms of, you know, the Daily Planet takeover. I think that this was another missed opportunity to introduce the character of Morgan Edge. And that's familiar to anybody that reads the comic books of the 70s. And I think they should have gone one further here. And they shouldn't have just taken over Daily Planet, but I think that the WGBS TV channel should have been introduced, and they should have come to Clark Kent and made him the news anchor. Because then, if that was the case, Clark could have been reporting live from the nuclear summit and whatnot, and you know, he would have been more directly involved with it rather than just viewing it as an outsider. I think there was a terrific opportunity there. I think, great as an actor as Sam Wanamaker is, I think if you'd have cast somebody like James Woods as Morgan Edge, that would have introduced a dynamic, a fabulous dynamic to it, because then, you know, Jackie Cooper and James Woods would have fenced, you know, would have bounced off each other, an absolute treat, you know, kind of here's James Woods, Morgan Edge, the, you know, the kind of face of the future, and, you know, Perry White fading into the past, and, you know, such a great opportunity for dramatic conflict there. But as is, you know, you get the sense that, you know, it explains itself quite well. It unravels as a plot quite well. But, you know, this scene set in Clark's apartment, this is kind of the resolution of, you know, of the entire love story, really, between Clark and Lois. And again, I think that there was probably another wasted opportunity here, because we're all, you know, it's a decade later and we're not kids anymore. And, you know, we've loved, you know, we've turned back the world. We've had memory-inducing, memory lost kisses, all that kind of stuff. And I think as grown-ups now, I think that he's, you know, because, you know, if you're putting yourself at the forefront of everything when you're getting, you know, you're eradicating nuclear weapons, I think it's just, and you're saying to, you know, that I'm now a citizen of this planet, the Earth is my home too. And if you're labouring to establish Superman or Clark as a character in and of himself that isn't Clark or Superman, then you know what? You can take the glasses off and you can say to the one that you love and you trust most that, yes, this is me. You know, this was the time to do it, I think. I think they missed an opportunity by him just going, you know what, whatever. And they do kind of, you know, I think that, you know, just like she says at the beginning of this film, I remember everything. I don't think that those kisses are particularly effective, or at least not as much as Superman would like to have us think, because, you know, she's nothing if not a smart girl, and I think that she kind of recognizes the fact that he is under an obligation to the world and not just her, and I think that she has learned to live with it. I don't think she's forgotten a damn thing, even when she makes out that she does. But again, that's not explored, and I wish it kind of was, and I wish that I wish that the Superman character, the Clark Kent character, kind of acknowledged that and just took the glasses off and went, you know what, it's time to stop playing around. You're the only one I can talk to. I mean, if you're the only one I can talk to, then, you know, reveal yourself. You know, it's, you know, fellas, if you're out there and if you've been in a relationship, you know that that's the kind of thing you have to do eventually at some point anyway, isn't it? I mean, let's be honest here. So, again, missed opportunity. But here we are, moving on swiftly with the plot as it is, and everything seems to be going well in Lutherland. And now we're going to take over the business in typical Gene Hackman style. Again, a little bit campily overacted here, you know. But again, in the context of this, what we're missing out of are better scenes of when Lex has actually gone to the Pentagon and gone to the Kremlin and stirred up feelings within there and made each side paranoid, which much better serves the plot than what we see here. This is kind of an offshoot of that. This is just kind of what the residuals of it, if you like. The trouble that he's actually caused, the you know, the worldwide kind of incident that he's about to unwittingly set off isn't alluded to, and the picture loses loses some of its grandiose quality because of that. You know, you can't make it a, a global picture by just concentrating on, you know, Lex Luthor's business deals. There's got to be other stuff at work, which was, you know, the paranoia, the paranoia of the Cold War between East and West. They should have made much, much more of it than they did. If you watch the deleted scenes, you'll know what I'm talking about. The Gene Hackman's best scenes as well. This was this whole business where Superman is basically on his deathbed was apparently some kind of allegory for AIDS at the time, which I thought was pretty poor taste. I don't think that was the intention of it, but it certainly kind of echoed the kind of, you know, perception, if you like, that everybody had of that at the time. Again, as it was, the extended version of him with Clark crawling around his kitchen was probably a bit more effective, because you really got the sense that he was, in fact, dying. As it is, it's just, you know, kind of like a plot, another plot thing that was kind of sewn up a bit too quickly. And this is the most nonsensical part of the entire film. Even when you watched it first time as a 13-year-old kid, that first shot when Nuclear Man lands is wonderful, with the matte painting behind it. This is actually an alleyway between Elstree Studios that they managed to squeeze this this Metropolis street into. But when Nuclear Man says, "Where is the woman?" and Superman knows who he's actually talking about, has absolutely no context in what you've seen in this picture up to now. It makes no sense whatsoever. I don't know how they thought they could get away with it. I don't know what they were actually thinking. I don't know if they were thinking at all by this point, and it was just a case of, like, we need to lose 2 reels, and anything that's left in the film as fallout as a result of taking out those 2 reels, we don't care about. Of course, the prior to this, you see Nuclear Man looking at the newspaper saying and recognizing Lacey Warfield. Again, that makes no sense in context of it. Is if the deleted scenes had remained, you'd know that Nuclear Man 1 fell in love with Lacey Warfield the minute he saw her. That sense memory carries on to Nuclear Man 2, who still maintains that. And then at this point, where they're having the battle in Metropolis, Superman has already convinced Lacey to act as bait for Nuclear Man. He flies her out over the ocean. Nuclear Man chases, and then Superman gets back to Metropolis, puts Lacey in a safe place, and so that basically they're fresh off the chase when Nuclear Man says, "Where is the woman?" So, and in absence of that, you just think, well, I guess that Superman's psychic then, because he knows who we're talking about, and the film collapses under its own weight at that point, I think. And so, really, you're at the point now where it's kind of everything else that you're looking at now is just kind of gloss, and you know, you can just admire the 1 or 2 of the visual effects, but in terms of plot and in terms of the story, we've lost it now. It's kind of over, because it's just a bit silly now, because it doesn't make any sense. So all that's left to do is kind of enjoy the the spectacle, because we've just managed to undo the story, basically. And isn't that terrible? Isn't that terrible? Because anybody, the world over, watching this film would have had the same reaction, unless they weren't paying any attention at all. When when Nuclear Man says, "Where is the woman?" and Superman goes, "Give it up, you'll never find her." How does he possibly know who's talking about? So it's so sad, isn't it? I mean, and then you get wonderful switcheroo shots here, where again they do the same, where Mark lands, Chris comes from around the corner. Really clever stuff. Another lovely live flying shot there, which is just Mark turning around and flying off in the same direction. and edited in such a fashion that it looks like two different shots. Really clever, but economical. You see how they, they did all this stuff, and you get the sense that it was only kind of like done in like one or two takes, and quickly, and nobody was really paying too much attention. Here's another switcheroo. That's an edit that Chris is wearing the harness, cuts to Chris without the flying harness and the rock. So all very, all very clever stuff, and used in a better context, in a story that's more captivating, just enhances the whole experience. But then, stuff like this, because let's remember that, 2 pictures ago we saw Superman fighting 3 supervillains and taking somebody like none, or 7 feet of him, and punching him straight through not only the ground but a building itself, and really demonstrating how extraordinary his powers were. And is it because of his weakened state? Because he's just kind of come back round to with the green crystal, not the kind of not as strong as he should be yet, and he's still suffering. But he seems to be struggling here with just fighting himself, and we've seen him fight himself already in 3, and that was done better. Superman 2 was done better, and this business where now he can fire bolts, I guess. In the storyboard, Superman fires them back. Thank God they cut that out, because that's I think what folks call a jump the shark moment. And this is where Mark Pillow hurts his ankle, by the way. That shot where he jumps over, he lands funny and hurts his ankle. But yeah, you kind of get the feeling that why is he struggling so much here? This should be a much more full-on kind of violent battle, if you like. They should be really trading hard punches and really burrowing themselves into the surface of the moon and really going hard at it, and really kind of there should be a real Superman thing to do at that point would have with a headbutt. Nuclear Man should have flown off to the other side of the moon, or Superman should grab Nuclear Man and pummel him so hard that he actually bashes him through the moon and comes out the other side. But as it is with this, it's just kind of like he's battering him into the ground, and then you see Chris's foot move here when he realigns himself just before he goes, and this is the stuff, because they didn't do enough takes. I don't think that they said, right, let's get another one of those. Or again, in the editing, that John Shirley's editing, who probably just kind of, as soon as they found out that they were going to take 2 reels out of it, he probably never came back into the editing suite again. So who is responsible for the final edit? He retained the credit, but you would really struggle to stand by this as your work, having gone through the the butchering that it had, really, where it's nonsensical for one thing, and it looks like it's cobbled together with a whole series of first takes. There doesn't seem to have been anybody standing by watching for the detail. Again, great a shot as that is, and as great a little sequence as this is, with the whole context of the flag and the achievements and everything of the US, and we're acknowledging all these things. Everything's in place the way it should be. But then we get a shot like this where Chris is yanked up from his wires before he's actually ready to take off, and that needed another take. That needed another. Let's have another pass at that, Chris, because Bob Harmon on the other end saying, "Gosh, sorry, I went too quick there, didn't I? And you weren't ready." But it's all these little gaffes that amount to a spectacular. I mean, and again, here we go with probably the most infamous of gaffes in the entire Superman series, where not only is not only is Lacey breathing in space, but it is apparently light years away. Now, there is something to be said here. All right, I mean, I've been hinting at it all the way through with the physics of Superman. If Nuclear Man has the same aura that Superman does, and he can extend it so Lacey can breathe in space, that's one explanation, which is okay. But it's not made implicit here. There's no subtleties in the script to suggest that that's what can happen. Instead, he flies her into space where everybody, even my little boy knows that you can't breathe in space. And so what you're doing at that point is we've kind of been winding the audience up to this point. We've been annoying them with all the little gaffes, with a collection of all these terrible little visual effects. But now we've really rubbed it in their faces by doing that, because we haven't proffered any kind of explanation. The visual effect is dire, and we've pushed physics, even in Superman terms, too far. And all you need to do is change the background plate to Metropolis at night, and it's fixed. It's utterly fixed. Nobody would have given it a second thought. Nobody would have cited it as the huge embarrassment that it is. It just would have been, another shot in the picture that carried the story on. But in absence of that, its ridiculousness kind of undoes it. This scene is again just in those doors behind Jackie Cooper there. Just behind those doors is the Winter Gardens where the Metropolis Museum was. In fact, I'm surprised they framed it so you couldn't see trees. But again, this is just the entryway to that same building, and that is the Daily Planet lobby. And they've got an inflatable globe there for the Daily Planet. Again, it's reminiscent of, just reminiscent enough of what we saw from the New York footage to kind of place it, but it doesn't quite make it. And again, we're back outside Milton Keynes train station here for the scenes that they shot in November. Again, this is a big deal at the time. Milton Keynes Council were very. But you would be, wouldn't you? And Superman films were one of the most famous franchises in the world, and here they were, right outside Milton Keynes Newtown, shooting the new one. Nobody knew that it was supposed to be standing in for the UN. It was just a generic building in Metropolis at this point, I think. But imagine, if you will, one day you're in Milton Keynes and you see, that being filmed with Chris flying in. But again, just to add to the number of gaffes there, you've got the reflection of the flying crane in the windows. Dick Donner would never have stood for anything like that. I mean, for all the the minor nitpicks that you can make about the other Superman films, gaffes the size of, or the magnitude of that would never have been permitted. But nonetheless, it is what it is, and this is quite a Hollywood bit of symmetry here, where we've had the adventure, we've done our bit, and now we kind of realize that the destiny of humanity is yours. It's not mine to kind of I could only show you. But here I am, living proof that there's other races, there's other worlds, and in spite of that, you're still along this path where you're committed to destroying yourselves. So there's it raises lots of interesting questions, it raises lots of interesting theories, but again, it's to kind of just that right side of light-hearted, not to be it's not Threads, and it's not When the Wind Blows, which was part of the school curriculum at the time that this was on. Can you imagine that? And to any of my American friends, if you've not seen Threads or When the Wind Blows, please do yourself a favour and don't. Your equivalent of it was called The Day After, which was a nuclear Holocaust film, which I've not seen. But the British versions of it were just, they stick with you. And, to this day, it's nightmare-inducing stuff. And, in the context of those, plus this, they are very interesting kind of flip sides of each other. And it's all very much to do with the age that we were living in at the time. And, it was in parts kind of traumatic and, fascinating all at the same time. And this is kind of like, the light-hearted version of, what could possibly be if you kind of added the twist of a super being to it. It's a perfect comic book, I think. It's just not, it's kind of like, it's a perfect comic book serialized over 4 issues, but then, you get a poor artist in number 3. And you kind of like, you don't like that issue because but it doesn't undo the whole story, because the whole story is pretty good. It's just that, there's a whole bunch of stuff in there that you just don't think works. And that's kind of what this film is. It's a patchwork quilt of, stuff that is so good that's undone by the details. And then you get a wonderful throwback, which is just, reclaimed footage from the first couple of Superman films. And there we go. And I haven't even taken breath, folks. As I say, this isn't going to be one of those where you think, the cat stood on your remote and turned the commentary off. There was so much to get across, and I'm so glad that I think I got most of it across. It's a joy. It's always a joy to watch this. I just think it's such fun. At least it doesn't fail to be fun. It fails on a number of other levels. We all know the story about what actually happened with Canon. We know how things ended up the way they did. We know that the majority of the cash went to Masters of the Universe instead, which is probably, if I was going to do an audio commentary again, it would probably be on Masters, and it would probably be on Flash Gordon, or, I'm a big fan of the underdog films, and underdog science fiction is kind of my forte. If you're going to admit to having any kind of forte, it might as well be that. But yeah, again, this I have absolute undying affection for. And to reiterate, Restore Superman 4. Restore Superman 4 is all about getting that context back. So with those scenes reinserted into the context of the picture that actually give the story its substance back and its sense back more than anything else, that absolutely is so fundamental. I mean, yeah, at a very basic level, sure, it would be nice to see the deleted scenes, but we've seen the deleted scenes, even if it's a work print kind of form. What we haven't seen is everything integrated into the picture. We've seen the comic adaptation, so we know how the story plays out, but we haven't seen it in its complete form. And I'm sure there are some surprises that neither the deleted scenes as they are, or the comic book adaptation covered. That tends to be the case, doesn't it? There's always surprises. There's always a couple of shots. There's always some dialogue. There's always something different. And, the build-up where the failed nuclear man, Clive Mantle's part, leading on to, getting it right second time with Nuclear Man 2, the whole subplot of, east and west at each other's throats, and literally on the button. I mean, there are a couple of deleted scenes where Nuclear Man shows up on radar to both sides as a missile. In fact, I think he turns into a missile. That's what's suggested in the comic book. I don't know how they managed to represent that on film, or even if they did. But because he registers or he pings as a nuclear missile, both sides are saying who's launched. And it's not one of ours, it's not one of ours. And, the relief when they both stand down because they realise that it's not a missile at all, it's in fact Nuclear Man. Should have been a pretty tense moment, on paper. But, I could go on and I could go on and I could go on. But I hope you've enjoyed this. That's the end of the picture. That's the end of the credits. And it's been an absolute joy to talk about it with you. If there's any questions that you have from this, if there's anything else that you want me to elaborate on, I'm especially kind of committed to talking about the physics of Superman. I'm interested in people's thoughts on that, whether you think it's just an absolute load of garbage or you think there's some kind of legitimacy to that. I think it's quite fascinating because I think it goes back to, I think that even his transformations are kind of like dimensional. I don't think that he literally gets undressed. I think there's some kind of dimensional crossover when he changes from Clark to Superman. But it's all a Kryptonian thing. And I don't like having a rationale particularly. I think the Superman's powers being Kryptonian and not understanding how Kryptonian physics work is brilliant. And I don't necessarily want to know how Kryptonian physics work. I'm just interested in how Kryptonian physics work on Earth. And I'm just going to have to stop it there because otherwise I'll never stop at all. Thanks for listening. Please keep up with us on KateWonder.com, KateWonderEurope.com, Restore Superman 4. God bless you all. You're all wonderful. I love talking to you. I love talking about this. It's my favourite thing in the world. God bless you. Thanks a lot.